How about a mommy that is cleaning the house and feeding the kids and doing the
Percent.
laundry and shopping and putting the kids to bed?
1,000,000%. That mommy, us,
That applies to each one of us.
that is so true because we are doing all of those physical things to sustain a home for God. How's God going to have this family run if the mommy isn't shopping and cooking and cleaning? All of those very physical actions, they're for God, and God appreciates them as such. So that is another beautiful example of how so much of our life, mundane, this isn't mundane. Would I have all this whole huge family if it wasn't for God? Would I be hosting all these people for my Shabbos meal and therefore cooking so much more and putting so much exertion and effort if it wasn't for God? Would I need to put so much attention to my appearance if it wasn't that I was trying to look beautiful within the laws of modesty? Is this not for God? So there's so many layers and layers, and this is what I meant before. We interact with the physical all day long. And if our intention is for God, we could be elevating all of this physical because we so much interact with the physical. It's like the sages say the advantage of a woman over a man in terms of charity is a man doesn't give charity on the Shabbos because he can't deal with money, but women can give charity on Shabbos because they can feed the hungry. We discussed last week when we started chapter 7 that our animal soul and body are comprised of a spiritual energy that has come through the filters called klipas noiga. And the last chapter, we discussed klipas tameos, which are filters that are much heavier and stronger and more obscuring and don't let the godliness out. The godliness is there, it's vivifying, but we can't access it, which means we cannot directly use that item to serve God. The whole purpose of using an item is to serve God, is to bring that energy to God. And with klipas tameos, I can't touch that godliness, I can't shift it. Klipas noiga, which is everything that God permits, which is a high majority of our world, means the godliness is obscured, is behind layers of klipa, of shells, of barriers, but I can, through my actions, through my godly intention and godly action, reach that godliness, shift it, separate it from the klipa, strengthen it, elevate it to God, and the klipa, the shells, the husk disappear. They have nothing to vivify them. The most significant piece of klipas noiga that I'm supposed to care about is my body and my animal soul. And what does this mean? They're klipas noiga. It means on one hand, they're not innately godly, but I can shift them to godly by serving God, by doing a commandment, by doing something which prepares for a commandment, by doing something for the sake of heaven. Because their essence, nature, is klipas noiga, which means there's an accessible shine. There's an accessible godliness. The nature of a Jew is to be a good person because the godliness is accessible. And that is what we are up to reading. We're on the second page, about 6 lines to the parentheses. We just said that the animal soul of a Jew is from klipas noiga, where we have majority evil, it's klipa, but there is that godliness shining through. Shemimenu ba'os, that from this godliness that's shining through the energy that's vivifying my animal soul, ba'os mustaivos, come the good traits, the good character traits, in the animal soul of a Jew, as explained above. The animal soul of a Jew is a nice animal, is a refined animal, is a good animal, is a godly animal. Jews are good. It doesn't mean religious Jews are good people. Jews are good people. We have this concept very famously in the Talmud where a collector from Israel, where the Jews were insanely impoverished, is in Babylonia, where the Jews are much more affluent. And he goes to one village, Shetel, and door to door, nobody will give him anything. And he declared, he was a big rabbi, said, these people aren't Jewish. This is a not Jewish town. Jews are nice people. And this is where we have this famous concept that Jews by nature are rachmanim, are compassionate, and are gomle chasadim, are doers of kindnesses. It doesn't mean because we're religious. It doesn't mean because we're listening to our godly soul. It means because we're a Jew. It means because our animal soul is nice. So why is our animal soul nice? Because our animal soul is from klipas noiga. And klipas noiga means the shine, noiga. There's a shine of godliness that penetrates through all the barriers. And I can see the shine. And when I look at a Jew, not a Jew serving God. It's simpler when I see someone not serving God. Because if I see someone serving God, I would think this is the godly soul. They're not God. but they're such a nice person. They do so much kindness. They do so many good deeds. That's the animal of a Jew. The godly is even more. That's the animal. And we see this. Charities, all the federations. Who's funding all the federations? Religious Jews? No. They're gathering all these millions to send to Israel. These are not religious Jews. They're good people. Not because they know it's a commandment. Not because they're listening to God. Not because they're listening to their godly soul. That's the nature of the animal soul. There's this famous, beautiful essay of Mark Twain. Mark Twain was accused, based on something he wrote, of being anti-Semitic, which wasn't the biggest crime in those days, or unfortunately probably today. But to refute the claims, he wrote an essay on the Jew. Go down to go up. Because he wrote something that people thought was against Jews, he said, not at all. And he wrote this beautiful essay on who's the Jew? What's this mystery of the Jew? Who are the Jews that Mark Twain knew at that point in America? If you ever met a Jew, he definitely wasn't a religious one. But he's describing what good people they are, what high morals, what high values. That's the animal nature of a Jew. So the Rebbe is saying this proves my point. Telling you klipas noiga means there's a godliness that can penetrate the klipa. You can access that godliness. You can shift that godliness. You can see it. You can sense it. You could smell it. Look at the Jew. Look at the animal of a Jew. You can sense that godliness. That shows you what klipas noiga is all about. It's an interesting thing to think about because we could be doing nice things and it's literally coming from our animal soul. Our animal soul should be very nice. And it should be that every Jew we meet, we should also see, yeah, they're such good people. That could be literally coming from their animal soul. That is the Rebbe's point. Let us continue. Now we are right after the parentheses. V'hu b'chinas mimutzas. Now, the energy that we're discussing, because again, klipas noiga is an energy. A lot of times we get confused because I'll say, oh, this is klipas noiga. No, I'm using the terms loosely and roughly and inaccurately. This is a physical item that is receiving its life force through the channel of klipas noiga. Klipas noiga is a channel over the godly energy that's vivifying many physical items in our physical world. So this energy, this channel of klipas noiga is like airy. Ben shalosh klipas tameos lagamri. Between on one hand, on the lower end of the spectrum, those three absolutely impure levels, as we discussed, those three elements of fire, of wind, and of water that are creating barriers so thick that we cannot access the gods, and therefore the items they vivify are forbidden because we have no use for them, no ability to use them to serve God. Or on the other end of the spectrum, between that energy of pure godliness where there are barriers, like your godly soul. And therefore, and this is the critical point, sometimes she falls down and she becomes incorporated within the energy of the three totally impure shells, as it's explained in the Eitz Chaim, in the name of the Zohar. And sometimes she becomes comprised within the energy of Kedusha. Hainu, meaning to say, and I'm reading a lot here because we've definitely discussed this, when that good, when that godliness is separated from the evil, as we've said, when you do something good, a commandment for the sake of heaven, having God in mind, something to lead to a commandment, this is shifting the energy. So the first step one, it's separated from those cleats, from those shells of evil. V'goiver, that's step two. And this godliness gets strengthened. Step three, she now ascends the Kedusha. She ascends to be comprised in holiness. And as I've told you, at that point, the klipa ceases to exist because there's nothing vivifying it. This is very critical information, and therefore we've said it many times, and therefore it's been very simple. Our area of challenge, our main concern, in a sense, is klipa noiga. Because what's forbidden is forbidden. I can't shift it. Yes, when I'm tempted and don't give in, it lessens the evil. True. In a very unusual situation where I'm supposed to use something forbidden, I can shift it. True. But most of the time, I can't really shift that energy. So there's not that much for me to do with something forbidden besides don't do it. Something godly, most significantly to me, my godly soul. My godly soul was completely godly before she entered this world. My godly soul is completely godly no matter what I do when I'm in this world. And my godly soul will be completely godly after she leaves this world. Does she grow through her journey? Of course. God is ultimately fair and we go down to go up. She gains by the journey, but she's godly to start with. So the area of concern, the area of struggle, the area of opportunity is klipas noiga, because now I have the opportunity to take something that is currently stuck in klipa and move it and add it to godliness. This is where God finally gains from creation. He's the businessman. He's looking at his books. He's looking at his records. And you know what it is? Loss, loss, loss. Every world, godliness gets minimized, godliness gets minimized, godliness gets minimized until we come to our world. And then the Jew interacting with an item that gets its vitality from klipas noiga, there's a gain. There's something new. There's a new energy that didn't exist before when the Jew is interacting with this item and does something godly with it. Now there's a profit in creation. So we give God the new energy, the exciting energy, the profit of creation, when we can take these items, these physical items that are permissible, which is how we know they're klipa, and we use them to serve God, do a command with them, do something for the sake of God with them, do something to prepare for a command with them, and we shift the energy. As we said, separate it, strengthen it, it ascends, it becomes part of holiness. We add it to godliness. That's what we can do. And that's why this is the exciting area. And that's why this is the primary focus. So we believe in using the physical that's permissible, unless you know that it will take you over. And that's the delicate balance of how much should I use this physical world? As much as you can handle. Whatever you can handle, that you're the boss, that the God rules, that you're giving it to God, the more the better. And whenever you know you're going to lose it and you're going to be under and it's not giving it to God, stay away. Because as the Rebbe is saying, I'm speaking very positive, but there is the other side. The same way klipas noiga is so exciting because it can be elevated. I'm creating something new. I'm giving God something he never had before. This is the gain and profit of creation. It also goes the other direction. If a Jew interacts with klipas noiga inappropriately, not for a mitzvah, not for the sake of heaven, not for preparation for a mitzvah, it goes down. And then when it's going down, it's adding to the energy of klipas tameos. So it's constantly fluid. What's forbidden is stuck in the realm of forbidden, 99.9% of the situations. What's godly is godly. You're not going to tarnish it. But klipas noiga, look at your cell phone. This is an item of klipas noiga. I can use this and give this to God. I can listen to Torah on this. I can call someone to make them feel better. I can plan a good deed on this. I can do lots of godly things with this. I can watch beautiful classes that will inspire me and help my service. There's so much good I could do with a cell phone. And there's so much bad I could do with a cell phone. And whenever I'm doing good, the energy is shifting and ascending to godliness. And if God forbid I'm doing the opposite, the energy is going down and is temporarily stuck in klipas tameos. That's what happens. And that's what happens with anything permissible in this world that a Jew interacts with. So now to emphasize this point, the Rebbe is going to give two pretty extreme examples. What point is the Rebbe trying to explain to us? Which you all know perfectly, that literally anything that's permissible, that means we have the ability to shift it to God. Because there could be many permissible things in this world that we would think, I can't bring that to God. That's not godly. That's not holy. But it is. Because otherwise it would be forbidden. It's very simple. This is not a world, so to speak, of gray. This is forbidden. This is godly. This is opportunity. Three very clear-cut dimensions. So if we're in the realm of opportunity, which means it's permissible, which means it's klipas noiga, that means I can bring this to God. If I couldn't bring it to God, it would not be permissible. So the first example the Rebbe gives is food, obviously kosher food, but okay, that's not such a shocker. But the Rebbe is giving specifically examples of very luxurious foods, foods that we would think, oh, that's taiva, that's indulgence. And indulgence is an example of taking something permissible and temporarily lowering it because you're indulging. So if it was something that I am just eating for the sake of my pleasures, it's going down. But it's kosher. It's permissible. So that means I have an opportunity here to elevate it. So the Rebbe is going to explain to us examples. We could do it in other ways as well, but examples to emphasize his point. If it's permissible, it's klipas noiga. If it's klipa permissible, you can and should give it to God. So the Rebbe says, Kigon, for example, derech mashal, ha'oichel basra shmeina de savra, someone who eats very rich, fat meats, v'shoise yayim mevusam, and he's drinking scented wines. So really rich meat, really good wines, children's foods. You don't live on meat and wine, water, bread, beans, vegetables, meat and wine. I can give that to God. If I couldn't, they'd be forbidden. How am I giving that to God? So the Rebbe says, to broaden your mind for God and his Torah. Now, that might sound very strange to you because you could say fat meats and scented wines, they'll put me to sleep. They're not going to make me learn better. So we do have to understand when we're learning this, that in ancient times, people's bodies were much stronger and healthier than they are today. And also the food wasn't much healthier and didn't have all the toxins ours does. Things weren't chemically manipulated as most of the food we eat. So literally in the times of the Talmud, they would eat meat and drink wine to be smarter in understanding Torah. K'da'amar Rava, like Rava says in the Talmud, chamra v'recha, wine and its scent. The Rebbe doesn't continue the quote, but it says wine and its scent. This is to open up the mind to understand Torah. So here we have an example of taking something that was permissible and you wouldn't think you could give it to God. And the Rebbe says, sure you can. Eat the meat, drink the wine to learn Torah better. There's a story in the Talmud, the Rebbe's not quoting it here, with another sage. His name was Reb Nachman. And he said to Rava, the sage we just quoted, I'm sorry, the answer I told you yesterday wasn't exactly precise. And he apologized and explained it was because he hadn't eaten meat yesterday. So since he hadn't eaten meat yesterday, his mind wasn't as clear, and that's why his answer wasn't correct. Why had he not eaten meat? Because he was fasting. Since he was fasting, he didn't eat meat, and therefore, since he didn't eat meat, his mind wasn't so clear, and his answer wasn't so correct. In other words, we have to give an answer, why didn't he eat meat? Because obviously he would eat meat because he knows that eating meat sharpens his mind to better learn Torah. So when these sages are eating the meat and drinking the wine, it's not an excuse. We discussed this last week. You could sometimes say, yeah, it's for God. But a fool is someone who's thinking he's fooling someone besides himself, right? Don't be a fool. Using God as an excuse. And people do that. These sages were not fools. They were not using God as an excuse to have a nice steak. They were eating the meat and drinking the wine for the sake of God. And therefore, that meat and wine was holy, as the Rebbe is going to say. We're going to see how holy in a second. But first, the Rebbe is going to give us another example of how you can use meat and wine to serve God. There's a command to enjoy Shabbos and Yom Tov. So you want to eat special foods that you wouldn't normally eat. This is special, this meat. If this is special, this wine, and you're eating it for the sake of Shabbos and Yom Tov, not for your stomach and you're using Shabbos and Yom Tov as an excuse. You're eating it for Shabbos and Yom Tov, you're giving it to God. Now, these two examples have two different aspects to them, which is why the Rebbe is giving two examples. Obviously, we know in Tanya, the Rebbe is very careful and is not wasting his words. And he's spending a lot of words on these examples. So the difference between these examples is the first example, which is more surprising, is not a commandment, meaning the commandment is to study Torah. The sage, when he's eating the meat and drinking the wine, he is not studying Torah. He is preparing himself to study Torah. It's not even a commandment. And the energy is shifting to God. The second example is not as surprising because it actually is a commandment. There's a command to have pleasure, have physical pleasure in Shabbos and Yom Tov. So when you're eating the meat and wine or the chocolates or the cake or whatever goes in your house, because I want to have pleasure in my food on Shabbos and Yom Tov, you're doing a commandment. So obviously the energy of the food is ascending to God. When you're eating the meat and drinking the wine to broaden your mind because you know you're going to study Torah and you want your mind to be sharp when you study Torah, you haven't done a commandment yet. What this is called technically is hechsher mitzvah. It's preparing you for a mitzvah. And still, and the Rebbe makes these two equal. He doesn't say, and the second example is better than the first or stronger than the first or accomplishes more than the first. They both are doing the same thing. If it's a commandment, or if it's preparing for the commandment, as long as it's sincere, the energy literally ascends and becomes godly. That meat, that wine is now in the realm of, and that's because you gifted it to God. And that's exactly what we're here to do. Hopefully our thinking is how we can apply this ourselves. And do we apply this ourselves? And looking at our physical world and what we interact with, probably most of our life is for God. And if there's something that's not, can I bring it to God? Am I supposed to be able to use this item and bring it to God? Or is it better if I don't use this item? Obviously, the perspective in this area of Tanya we're studying now is trying to figure out a way to use it for God. It's very significant to God, as the Rebbe is now going to say. How do we view these things? Azai, nisbarer chayis habasar v'hayayin. At this point, when you used it to sharpen your minds to study Torah, or when you used it to beautify and have pleasure on Shabbos or the holiday, the vitality, the God energy in this meat and wine was selected, was refined. That initially, of course, this was energy that had fallen under the shells, the husks of klipas noiga. But now it's nisarer. It's extracted from that klipa, oila lashem, and it is elevated to God, oila uke karban, like a sacrifice, not just like a sacrifice, like an oila sacrifice. An oila is one of the types of sacrifices. We have atas, we have an asham, we have free will offerings, an endava. We have an oila. What's the difference? An oila is coming because you want to get even closer in your relationship to God. You want to give God a really nice gift. So you know what you do? You take an animal and it's completely burnt on the altar. None of the fats, none of the flesh is consumed by anyone but God. Some sacrifices, like a carbon shlomim, peace offering, the owner gets a part of the food, the priest, the Kohen gets a part, and God gets a part. It's burnt on the altar. Many sacrifices go on the altar, and the Kohen, the priest, gets a part. The oila is unique. It is the only offering that the whole flesh of that animal is given to God. It's completely burnt. It ascends, oila. It's ascending completely to God. So the Rebbe here, he wants to show you how real, how precious this is. He's not only saying that this meat is now like God's offering. You now gave it on the altar. You gave it on the altar like a carbon oila, which means it's completely God. Wasn't yours. It's completely God's, which is pretty extreme if, again, you're thinking of the example here given. I did enjoy a good steak, a good roast. It was delicious scented wine. You gave it to God. The example we see of this in the Talmud was Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, otherwise known as Rebbe, he established the Mishnah, and he was the leader of the Jews. And as such, he lived for those days what was considered a luxurious life. Nobody would blink twice in America today, but he had out of seasons fruits by his table, which was, whoa. So he lived a very luxurious life. And it states in the Talmud that before he passed away, he threw up his hands to God and he said, you know, God, you know, again, not fooling God, did. All of my luxuries was for the honor of God. It was for the honor of the Jewish people. I did not benefit from this, not one finger's worth. You could say, and he never ate any of the food. I'm not saying he never ate any of the food, but he could turn to God on his deathbed and say, you know, it wasn't for me, not one finger. It was completely for you. And that's what the Rebbe is saying here. When you are taking this food, it doesn't mean your food has to taste bad. It doesn't mean you should say, it's for God, I should not enjoy it, so I should put in too much salt, or I shouldn't put any salt at all. No, God gave us a beautiful world. We should use the beautiful world. But you could use the beautiful world, enjoy the beauty of the world, and it's completely for God, which of course is challenging. It's easier to say abstinence, bread and water. That's simpler. But not for this did I create you and create your beautiful world. I gave you a beautiful world because I want you to use the beautiful world. And I want you to enjoy the beautiful world. And you're enjoying the beautiful world, but it's for God. It's a carbon oil. This is a very strong point, and I hope a very practical point, because we interact with this beautiful world of God's all day long. So with our headspace and with what we do and how we feel and how we use it, taking all of these beautiful things that God gave us and he wants us to enjoy and sending it up to him as this sacrifice of the oila offering. Now, the Rebbe is going to give us another example. God wants you to serve him with joy. So therefore, jokes are part of serving God. Remember, in the previous example, we brought in Rava as saying the scented wine is so significant to properly learn Torah. So something else Rava did, besides making sure to have scented wine, was he would say jokes to his students. He would literally say these light words. Why is he saying these light words? To open up their minds so then they will properly learn Torah. So what is the nature of these words? They're obviously not forbidden, inappropriate jokes. There's nothing of klipas tomatoes, but they're not words of Torah. They're lighter words. So when he's saying these lighter words, what's the spiritual energy of these lighter words? Klipas naiga. And what's he doing with this klipas naiga? He's shifting it to this because he's using it to enable his students to learn Torah. As it says, like Rava did for students. That initially, when they were starting the shir, the class, he would say these lighter words, what we would call a joke, and then the rabbis laughed. In other words, here's Rava. Now, Rava doesn't have the problems we as teachers might face, which is the students are paying no attention. His problem, so to speak, is the students are in such awe. They're sitting in front of Rava. They can't process. They can't think. They're so full of this awe. And Rava was like, shh, got to relax you. I've got to calm you down. I've got to open your minds to learn. You can't learn when you're like, I'm in front of Rava. He's so holy. You're not going to learn a thing. So Rava would begin his lecture with a lighter word. I don't know if it was a joke like we would call a joke. Maybe in contrast to the Torah, he was going to say it was called a joke. An example given in the Talmud, not with Rava, with Rabbi Akiva, was saying, what's the connection between Sarah and Esther? Sarah had the 127 perfect years, and therefore her descendant Esther ruled over 127 provinces. That type of joke. But compared to the Torah he's about to teach, that's a joke. And then their minds relaxed.
Tell you one?
Yes, bracha.
Who gave birth to 600,000 children in one shot?
Okay, who gave birth to 600,000? Oh,
because he's equal to all the Yidden.
That's a beautiful example because, again, this is what we mean by joke. Milsa de b'dei chusa literally mean words that will create laughter. So wait, why is that creating laughter? Oh, that's so clever. And compared to the Torah that we're going to teach, these are really light words. And it was for a godly purpose. It was so their minds would open up and they could learn Torah. So here we have words. Can you use a joke inappropriately? Of course. That's why I can't really listen to most comedians. It's a lot of inappropriate. That's the content of most jokes. Real klipas tomatoes. But it's permissible. If these words are permissible, there's the opportunity to elevate them to God. And this is an example how. In general, it says in another place in the Talmud that someone who brings laughter to people has a special place in the world to come because he's bringing joy to people. And bringing joy, that is a very godly thing to do.
How you measure how much this turns out to be? You may do something and you think it's for God, but how people react.
So you're saying that I have good intentions. I am bringing cake to class to make the people in class happy. I have good intentions. I want them to enjoy the class. I want them to enjoy the Torah. So I'm making the Torah sweet with the cake. I am taking klipas naiga and I'm giving it to God. But maybe it's not going to work out that way. Maybe everyone's going to, of course, devour the cake, but it's not in any way going to transfer to the class. They could even walk out and badmouth the class. They enjoyed the cake, but they didn't in any way connect it to the class. Maybe I wasn't even able to get them a blessing before, after. I would say that whatever you did went to Kedusha, went to godliness. Last week, Esther asked this question. She was saying if she's shopping and cooking and feeding people that are not serving God, is there any godly act here? And I said, of course, you're helping Jews. What the Jews are later going to do with your help, that's their issue. That's their end. But no question, you are helping Jews. You are feeding Jews. You are housing Jews. That is godliness. So I would say the same thing here. You have the best intentions. You are trying to bring these Jews closer to God. They're going to come closer to God through your chocolate cake. You don't see how it brought them closer to God from your end. It went up to Kedusha. What you did, the ingredients, the cooking, the baking, the brownies, from your end, they're all moved from klipas naiga to Kedusha. Did someone else maybe do something else that shifted the energy in another direction? Could be. But from your end, no. What happens afterwards, I don't believe that in any way taints your act. Malki?
It could also be, say you have Chabad houses and you have an audience that they don't know much of Torah yet, but you're there to bring Kedusha for them. And sometimes that's going to mean maybe doing something like a joke or something like that. Obviously, that's with Kedusha and it's appropriate because you have to be relatable to your audience.
Malki gave a perfect example of a shliach in a Chabad house who might be doing things that doesn't look at all to us like serving God, but it is serving God because he's doing this to connect to his people. I could think of my son who plays football with people and then frisbee and they go camping and biking. 100% he's doing it for his shlichus. It's 100% to bring these Jews closer to God. So going back to Rachel's question, here's the shliach who's playing football and frisbee and biking and barbecuing and camping, all with the intention of bringing a Jew closer to God. And taking Rachel's question, what if we don't see the Jew got closer to God? That's a separate issue. All your activities in doing these things, they're that carbon oila. As Malki said, obviously that doesn't mean the shliach, the emissary, can do anything forbidden and say, listen, to bring someone closer to God. As long as it's permissible, as she's saying, absolutely.
How about a mommy that is cleaning the house and feeding the kids and doing the laundry and shopping and putting the kids to bed?
1,000,000%. That mommy, us,
That applies to each one of us.
that is so true because we are doing all of those physical things to sustain a Jewish home, to sustain a home for God. How's God going to have this family run if the mommy isn't shopping and cooking and cleaning? All of those very physical actions, they're for God, and God appreciates them as such. So that is, thank you, another beautiful example of how so much of our life, mundane, this isn't mundane. Would I have all this whole huge family if it wasn't for God? Would I be hosting all these people for my Shabbos meal and therefore cooking so much more and putting so much exertion and effort if it wasn't for God? Would I need to put so much attention to my appearance if it wasn't that I was trying to look beautiful within the laws of modesty? Is this not for God? So there's so many layers and layers, and this is what I meant before. We interact with the physical all day long. And if our intention is for God, we could be elevating all of this physical because we so much interact with the physical. It's like the sages say the advantage of a woman over a man in terms of charity is a man doesn't give charity on the Shabbos because he can't deal with money, but women can give charity on Shabbos because they can feed the hungry. We're dealing with so much physical, and we have so many opportunities to take this physical and give it to God.
So we don't necessarily measure that.
We're not going to measure the
We try
success
to
or the
do the
outcome.
best.
No, and we honestly don't know. There could be so many times, Rachel, you cannot measure, and even the person you're interacting with can't measure. Like, again, you're giving this person your chocolate cake, wanting it to be a vehicle in whatever the situation is to help them get closer to God. It doesn't look to you like it got them any closer to God. If you ask them, they also say, what? And that doesn't mean it didn't. So we don't measure. And there's so many times when something happens and you don't even realize what shifted you to make the proper choice that you made. Or sometimes it could be a series of things. I had something interesting personally. I heard a Rebbe story that I had heard several times before. And I wasn't even paying that much attention when I heard it because I already heard it and I was doing something else. And the next day I had this real epiphany moment of awareness based on that Rebbe story. It really impacted me. Now, when I heard it, I would have told anyone it didn't impact me because I already knew it. It's a beautiful story, but I already knew it and I wasn't really paying attention. So why did it now impact me like the third or fourth time I heard it when I wasn't even paying attention? Maybe I'm a slow learner. I needed to hear it a number of times until it penetrated and then I got the point. So it could be you're doing something and the other person would say there was no impact there at all. And they're not aware that it was a drop. And there was a drop before. And there's going to be a drop after. But it was part of those drops. And there's so many people that make monumental decisions not being aware of all those drops. I remember a woman once in Chicago, very successful woman who returned to God and became a religious Jew. And I asked her what made, sometimes people are going through this issue. She was very successful seemingly. And she said it was my preschool. She said when I was, let's say, 3 years old, the public school didn't take kids then. So my mother sent me to the religious preschool. Now, this woman must have been in her late 40s, early 50s. But she answered the question like this. Does she know her preschool teacher's name? I'm sure not. But she knew it made an impression. So let's say you were that preschool teacher and there's this kid in your class for a year and she doesn't continue in the school and she goes off to public school and in no way does she seem any different. And you poured a year into her. You're going to know that in 45 years, it's going to flower. So we never measure success and we couldn't measure success if we tried. But I don't think success is the barometer undid something shift to godliness. It's a mitzvah. It's the preparation for a mitzvah. It's for the sake of God. That's what shifts it. All those things are in place. What happens afterwards has nothing to do with any of that. It went up to God.